What are some of the challenges, we kind of led into that, the shortage data that you all see, maybe Tim, in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I think, it's kind of a follow-up to your last question. The recent studies show over 50% of healthcare facilities in the country are operating at less than 1% gross margin. So they're not looking for transactional partners. They're looking for solutions. And that's where we are trying to partner with as many of those facilities as we can. And I think the provider side too, I've had multiple conversations with CMOs who said 20, 30 years ago, the providers that they got that were locums were not the best. And I'm not saying it the way he said it. But now that has changed. And a lot of physicians and advanced practitioners want to do locums. They don't want to be a cog in the wheel. And they tell us, like, I want to pick my schedule. I want to see patients. I want you guys to handle all that stuff. So we're seeing a much higher quality provider than we used to as well. So it's on both sides.
Yeah, definitely it's a career choice that folks are making now. And they see the flexibility. I think we've talked about that too. Like the flexibility, and they can name where they work and when they work. And then they're home when they want to be, or they're, on a vacation when they want to be. Yeah. Any other challenges?
Well, I think everybody has seen these graphs, and I know we've went through some data earlier today. To Tim's point, there's recent study that patient outcomes really have not changed. I think it was a hospital study, an internal medicine study that showed that the outcomes of the patients that were treated by locum tenens were no different than the ones treated by permanent folks. In addition to that, there was actually a small bit of cost savings rather than, which I know is not what one would think.
Right.
So that was interesting. And one other point that people often talk about the difference, and I'm almost entering year 20, believe it or not, doing this. I remember calling either providers or clients, and we made this joke on the congressional calls we make, and I know we'll probably get to that a little bit later, but they're like, local tennis, what is that, right? And it's not the out of town tennis, it's the local tennis. And now it's very common. It's a real career choice for the physicians, but I think Aaron said it earlier when he came up on stage, is who would have thought this group of people would be in this room, right? You have a combination of folks who's passionate about data, giving it so we can help communities and help providers find positions on a permanent end too, Christy, to your point. But we have HCOs here, we have competing entities here, but we understand that the industry is bigger than all of us, and it's in our best interest to collaborate on a lot of these issues. And it's really unlike any other industry, at least that a lot of the folks I'm close with, in other staffing verticals. It's seem more cutthroat. And like I said, it's a privilege to be able to communicate with colleagues like this. So.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would add to this is productivity. So if you talk to your seasoned physicians, they'll tell you that the physicians that are coming up behind them are less productive than they are. And so various things that you read will say that we need 1.5 to 1 3/4 to maybe 2 physicians to replace everyone that's retiring. And if you look at this data is from the Association of American Medical Colleges, their study on physician supply and demand. They do some pretty interesting modeling and looking at that productivity gap, both in terms of retiring clinicians, how productive they are, or aging clinicians, and also looking at different work styles, right? So you have people in this day and age, like work-life balance didn't really used to be a thing. It is now, and so you have people who don't want to come home and spend 3 hours of pajama time, doing their charting and medical records and things like that. But it has a real impact on FTEs and who's available in the market. So I think that's another thing that is very notable.
The challenge, like the 3 to 5 years, where does it go in terms of hard to fill if all that is the backdrop? I would say, today, I think Aaron showed a slide, $3 billion was his market size when he started Locumsmart. And it's probably going to clear $5 billion. this year. That'd be my prediction. I'm not SIA. So think about that. That's a decade to go from 3 to 5 billion, and we're still churning. These are hard, time to fill, as Erin mentioned. I mean, these are hard to fill jobs. That's why you all need us, right? And so I think that challenge that creates in terms of we need all the right employees to do that. We need engaged employees. We need employees working hybrid and not, and managing big teams. And all those are challenges, I think. But if you don't have all that, like, we're not going to meet the needs that are, helping close this gap. So I just think the sheer recruiting challenge that lies ahead in the next 3 to 5 years is immense. It's probably
Well, and furthermore, I think we all know this, but it's not like there's a lot of local tennis in Beverly Hills, right? And we work with, rural, undeserved areas more often than not. And the amount of counties that don't have, talk about an OBGYN, a general surgeon, but even primary care. So through the pandemic, you turn on any TV or media source and they're talking about preventative health care. And one of the reasons we did not respond well as a nation is because we're not particularly healthy. And it's like, well, we got to get these people in to see primary care earlier and often. Well, that's a problem if you don't have the supply of labor to do so. And I think that some of these jobs not only time to fill, but they stay open for sometimes years. And I think that we can be a part of the solution to that problem.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things, right, that COVID showed us, disparities in healthcare, just like you said, those rural areas and the access to care. A solution that I wanted us to talk about really was telehealth, digital, anything, right, from a technology perspective. But I was reading in a study this morning that, that's great. Sure, we can do that. But guess what? Those people in rural America, they don't have Wi-Fi. We found that in the schools, right? I'm in the most affluent county in Tennessee, I would say. And it was shocking to see how they sent all the kids home during COVID. And then, oh, wait, you don't have internet in your house? You don't have a smartphone, you don't know how to use it, you don't have a webcam. So I think the disparity, while we would say, great, tele can help those rural locations, I don't know. Like, I just think there's a different gap there. But anything related to kind of the disparities or covering for those rural lives, because I do think, when we're not there, when you're not there as our vendor partners, the patient lives are affected or lost ultimately. Yeah. Anything, Liz?
For sure. No, I mean, I think that the scary piece of this is that we don't have a true solution. There just aren't the numbers of individuals going into medical school that there used to be. And I always make the joke that back in the day, our parents wanted all of us to marry, doctors or lawyers because those, were the guys who made all the money. And, of course, today nobody tells us women who to marry. But more importantly is that there's so many careers out there now where you can make easily the money that a physician is making, an attorney is making, and you don't have that student loan debt. So, I think the concern is, what is the solution to that? How are we going to be able to, encourage people to follow those career paths again? Maybe it's something to do with student loan forgiveness. I don't know, but I think, the long-term picture is concerning for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think debt is the number one thing. I think any of the recruiters would tell you that that's the number one question. So, new employees you hire, they say, is the job remote? Our physicians say, what can you do to pay off my debt?
Yeah.
And that's why you see a lot more people getting into becoming NPs, right? Especially as they begin to get more practice authority and things of that sort, because you come out, you can still have similar patient impact, if not the same. I'm not an expert on that, but if you can do that without the debt. And I think, looking at these graphs and the gap of what's needed and what's there, I think part of the problem is it's like the Titanic, right? The problem wasn't they didn't see the iceberg, is they saw it and then they turned and it took so long for the boat to move. So by the time you're talking about entrances into medical school and residencies and fellowships, it just takes so long for the problem to get solved that you can't, there's no immediate solution.
Yeah. I know there's some proposed solutions to at least reducing some of the entrance exams and opening that a little bit wider. I've asked some friends who have kids in med school or looking at residency, and is this your experience? Because it's it's a lot that they go through to even try to get into school, and how many times they get turned down, and the openings that remain open. ENT is a fellowship that they never have enough people wanting to go into ENT. All the recruiters, how many of you need ENT? Like by the thousand, like, yeah, so.
I think you asked about technology. I do think the credentialing process at large, like I'm talking for internal malpractice credentialing, for facilities credentialing, for licensure, there has to be a focus from all of us on easing and trying to streamline the process, because it's a barrier for Phil, whether you're doing perm recruiting and for START, whether you're doing temporary recruiting, for a physician to want to do all of what is required to have a series of assignments. And it's one of, if our problem cannot be solved by making more doctors more quickly, you have to, the ones you have to move faster.
Right.
And so I do think we all have a role to play, and I know across all of our teams, I mean, we all are big believers, in the interstate medical licensure like that kind of work and helping your MSOs and your companies get more streamlined and effective to onboard quickly, like that helps everyone. And I think it's going to take all of us to focus on it. We ended up buying a technology company irrelevant to locums, just simply because we do so much of this. And so again, we all have to lean in like that. I don't think any one of us can be awesome on our own.
Yeah, Matt talks about this a lot at NAUTO. Because of the shortage, we should be removing friction from the process. In reality, the friction is becoming harder and harder to get a doctor or advanced practitioner started on time. And who loses?
Right.
I mean, the patients lose.
Right.
So, and when he says that every time, I think that's exactly right. I mean, we should be looking how we remove friction, and instead the process is getting harder.
Yeah, and I think outside of the credentialing, what we talked about, like the states that make it friendly for providers primarily to come work in that state, and those that are really hard. I recruit for one of those really hard states, and I've told the CEO, you need to go sit down with your governor. They need to understand what they're doing and the lives they're affecting in this state by how long it takes to get a medical license. Because I would love for all these people to fill those GI needs in those states. They don't really want to because it takes so long, and when it takes 6 months, a year to even get somebody in place, that is far too long.